Helen was 67 when she realized something was changing. Not dramatically, just slower mornings, a bloated belly, and the kind of tiredness that sleep no longer fixes. She wasn't sick, but she wasn't well either. Food didn't sit right. Her energy disappeared by noon, and the pills in her cabinet kept multiplying. Then she made one gentle change. Not a diet, not a cleanse. Just a quiet return to what her body had been asking for all along, better care for her gut. In the next few weeks, Helen began drinking a fiber-rich smoothie every morning. She added more plants to her plate. She learned how to read labels. But more than that, she started walking again, sleeping deeper and breathing slower. This isn't just about digestion. It's about living lighter, with less inflammation, clearer thinking, and fewer medications. In this video, we'll walk through the easiest gut healing routine for people over 60, step by step. No pressure, just powerful, quiet changes. And yes, we'll even uncover the non-food habits that heal your gut too. If this sounds like something your body's been asking for, please like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing your age and where you're watching from. It helps us help more people like you. As we get older, something quiet begins to shift inside us. The gut, once resilient and easygoing, becomes more sensitive, more reactive. After the age of 60, the community of beneficial bacteria in our digestive tract slowly begins to shrink. These are the friendly microbes that help break down food, support the immune system, and keep inflammation in check. Without enough of them, everything feels a little off. Digestion slows. Meals that once felt comforting now sit heavy. The body becomes more reactive to things we used to tolerate: processed snacks, preservatives, and artificial sweeteners. What once passed unnoticed now leaves behind discomfort, bloating, or unease. For many older adults, these changes don't always scream. They whisper, subtle signs like low energy in the morning, restless nights, or a vague fog that lingers through the day. And yet, so often these signals are brushed aside, chalked up to aging. But in truth, they are not inevitable. They are clues. The gut is not just a place where food gets processed. It's a command center. It speaks to the brain, communicates with the immune system, and holds the keys to inflammation, focus, and long-term vitality. When it struggles, so does everything else. But when it heals, you begin to feel lighter, not just in the body, but in the mind. There is less fatigue, more clarity. Sleep deepens. The immune system stands taller, and suddenly, things feel possible again. What many people don't realize is that caring for the gut after 60 doesn't have to be complicated. It begins with noticing, with trusting that the small discomforts you've come to accept might have a root. And that root often lies in the health of your inner ecosystem. Once we stop ignoring the signals, we can begin to respond to them, gently, intentionally, and with the kind of wisdom that grows only with age. Because healing your gut isn't just about food, it's about giving your body what it has quietly asked for all along: attention, care, and consistency. And that begins right here. Helen didn't start with a complicated plan. She didn't weigh food or count calories. She simply wrote a list, a handwritten checklist taped to her fridge. Nothing fancy, just the names of plants she liked or had been curious to try. Spinach, blueberries, lentils, cinnamon, mint, oats. She already ate often. Others, like fennel or flaxseed, were new. But that list became something more than a note. It became a quiet commitment, a gentle game. Every time she added something from nature to her plate, she checked it off and smiled. The idea was simple. Aim to include 30 different plants each week. Not 30 servings, just 30 types across meals, snacks, teas, soups, and even smoothies. That included vegetables, fruits, legumes, seeds, nuts, herbs, and whole grains. And within days, her body began to notice. The swelling in her belly softened. Her bathroom routine became more regular. But most of all, the fog began to lift. For the first time in years, she woke up without that familiar grogginess. Her head felt clear, her limbs are lighter. It wasn't magic, it was diversity. The richness of plant variety was feeding something deep inside her, the microbes that had been starved by decades of repetition and convenience. What she didn't know at the time was that every plant brought its own fiber, its own polyphenols, its own quiet instructions for healing, and the more she welcomed them in, the more her inner world responded. Her skin looked calmer. Her digestion became easier. And perhaps most surprising of all, her mood shifted. She felt more herself, more present, more resilient. The checklist stayed on her fridge, not as a rule book, but as a reminder that healing didn't have to be hard. It only needed to be intentional. By the third week, Helen no longer needed the checklist to feel progress. Her body told her. The eye, lightness, the focus, the ease in her joints, it all began when she made peace with food again, when she remembered that eating is not just survival, it's renewal. And it begins with adding life back to the plate, one plant at a time. Mornings became sacred for Helen, not because she rushed them, but because she slowed them down. Her day began with a soft light through the window, a quiet kitchen, and the gentle rhythm of preparing something that felt like medicine, but tasted like comfort. She didn't follow a recipe. She followed how she felt. She'd reach for a carton of unsweetened almond milk, one without those extra fillers and emulsifiers that once left her stomach uneasy. Sometimes she'd switch to oat milk, as long as the ingredients stayed clean. Into the blender went a handful of spinach, frozen berries that reminded her of summer, a spoonful of flax seeds, a few torn mint leaves, and a dash of cinnamon that made everything feel warm. On days when she needed more strength, she added a dollop of Greek yogurt or a scoop of plant-based protein. It wasn't about perfection. It was about giving her body something real before the world got noisy. This one habit helped Helen meet her fiber needs before breakfast was over. It kept her blood sugar steady, helped her stay hydrated, and gave her the quiet sense that she was nourishing herself instead of fixing something broken. And as the weeks passed, it became more than a smoothie. It became a ritual. Her gut felt calmer. Her mind is clearer. The morning aches that once slowed her down began to ease. There was something about that moment at the counter, the colors, the sounds, the knowing, that reminded her she was still in control of how she aged. She didn't need rules. She needed rhythm. She even kept a list of ingredients she liked, and rotated them each week. It kept things interesting. Strawberries one week, mango the next, a new seed, a different green, a hint of ginger on cooler mornings. Her body responded, not because she followed trends, but because she finally listened to the hunger for something pure, to the need for steadiness, and to the truth that sometimes the smallest daily acts, done with care, hold the biggest keys to long-term strength. Helen used to think that if something was labeled low-fat or heart-healthy, it must be good for her. The boxes looked clean, the packaging said all the right things, and the grocery aisle felt like a maze designed to confuse. But the more she listened to her body, the more she began to wonder if some of the discomfort wasn't coming from the food itself, but from what was hidden inside it. It started with the milk. Her gut never seemed to settle after her morning coffee. So one day she flipped the carton around and read every word. That's when she noticed ingredients she couldn't pronounce. Carrageenan, polysorbate 80, things that had nothing to do with almonds or oats. She swapped the brand for one with just 3 ingredients, and almost overnight the bloating eased. It gave her confidence. One change led to another. She stopped buying her old protein bars and cereals, the ones that promised strength and balance, but left her with sugar crashes and sluggish afternoons. She looked deeper and found added sweeteners hiding in juices and sauces she had never questioned. And those crackers she used to snack on during the news, they were filled with preservatives and gums that quietly stirred up inflammation. Helen didn't overhaul her pantry in a day. She picked 2 or 3 items each week and replaced them with something simpler. Her rule became clear. If she couldn't understand it, she didn't eat it. Slowly her body responded. The redness in her cheeks faded. Her stomach felt quieter. She didn't need antacids as often. And the energy dips she once thought were part of aging began to disappear. It wasn't about eating less. It was about eating real. For Helen, this shift wasn't just physical, it was emotional. There was relief in knowing that she could still take care of herself, even in small ways, that her body could still respond to kindness, and that sometimes Reading. A label could be the first step toward restoring trust in food and in herself. What surprised Helen most wasn't how fast things changed, it was how quietly they did. She hadn't expected much when she began adding more fiber to her meals, but within days, her body started speaking a new language. There was less pressure. In her belly, fewer late-night cravings, and more ease in her morning routine. What she came to understand was that fiber wasn't just something doctors talked about, it was a quiet healer. It moved things along without urgency, calmed inflammation from the inside out, and gave her gut bacteria the nourishment they'd been missing. Her joints felt looser, her mind is less foggy, her moods are steadier, and the scale, which hadn't budged in months, began to shift without her trying. Helen didn't rely on powders or pills, she used her plate. A warm bowl of lentil soup with a scoop of brown rice became a weekly lunch. Chia pudding with a pinch of cinnamon turned into a soft, soothing dessert. Some days, she simply topped her kefir with a handful of berries and felt proud of that tiny choice. The fiber came from the earth, not a label, and that made all the difference. There was something deeply satisfying in knowing she didn't need to force anything. Her body had been waiting, not for extremes, but for nourishment. As she ate more whole foods, her sugar cravings softened. Her digestion became regular, not rushed, and best of all, she began to feel safer in her body again. For years, Helen thought discomfort was a sign of getting older, but it wasn't. It was a sign of neglect, not on purpose, but from years of quick meals, forgotten breakfasts, and too many packaged promises. Now, with each fiber-rich bite, she felt herself coming back into balance. The healing didn't come from cutting things out. It came from bringing better things in, and that shift from scarcity to abundance, from fear to feeding, was what changed everything. Helen didn't want to spend her days cooking. At 67, her energy came in waves, and she learned to respect that. What she needed was something simple, something ready when she wasn't. So over time, her pantry and freezer became her quiet support system. No fancy gadgets, no elaborate recipes, just a handful of things she could rely on when her motivation dipped or her body asked for ease. Her cabinets always had canned beans and oats, versatile, filling, gentle on the gut. Her freezer held spinach and berries, waiting patiently for the mornings she needed a smoothie more than she needed a fork. On the shelf beside her teas, she kept a small tray with jars of cinnamon, turmeric, mint, and whatever herb felt interesting that season. She didn't use them every day, but their presence reminded her that healing could be fragrant, flavorful, even joyful. Having these ingredients on hand meant she never had to start from scratch. Whether it was a quiet dinner of oats with banana and flax, or a warm bowl of beans tossed with olive oil and herbs, she knew her gut was getting what it needed. There were days she didn't feel like cooking at all, and that was okay. The simplicity of her staples made it possible to still eat well, still feel good, still stay on track without guilt. What used to feel like a chore, feeding herself, became an act of care. With each small habit, her pantry turned into a form of self-respect. She wasn't chasing trends or copying someone else's plan. She was listening, and her gut listened back. There were fewer flare-ups, fewer restless nights. Her digestion stayed calm, even when the day wasn't. And what surprised her most was how these quiet foods, often overlooked, became the most reliable source of strength. On the days she needed a reset, she didn't reach for a cleanse or a fast. She opened her cupboard, blended a smoothie, or simmered something simple. That alone gave her comfort, because sometimes healing isn't about doing more. It's about having the right things in place when you need less. Helen used to skip breakfast or settle for toast and coffee, thinking it was enough. But by mid-morning, she'd crash. Her stomach would feel unsettled, and her thoughts would scatter. It wasn't until she started paying closer attention to the kind of fuel she gave her body that things began to shift. She swapped out her old milk for something simpler, unsweetened almond milk without gums or added oils. On other days, she used oat or cashew milk, always checking the label to make sure the ingredients stayed clean. It became second nature. What made the biggest difference, though, was something she hadn't expected. One morning, she blended kefir with a banana and a few ice cubes. It tasted smooth, tangy, and soft on her stomach. After her walk that day, she noticed something. She wasn't craving her usual mid-morning snack. Her energy held steady. She felt clear, grounded. That smoothie became a quiet ritual. Some days she'd add a spoonful of peanut butter or cinnamon. Other mornings she used plant-based protein from peas or hemp. The goal was never perfection. It was nourishment. Gentle, steady, real. For Helen, protein wasn't just about muscle or aging bones, it was about resilience. Something that stayed with her as the hours passed, giving her focus and ease instead of sugar highs and drops. On the days she wanted something savory, she'd scramble an egg with herbs or enjoy a piece of grilled fish with greens. Over time, her body softened. Her cravings faded. She didn't feel pulled towards sweets or snacks the way she once did. That stability, both in her digestion and her mind, came not from restriction, but from choosing foods that her body could trust. Foods that digest cleanly, proteins that strengthened without weighing her down. It was never about following a strict plan. It was about learning what helped her feel most like herself and returning to those things with care. As her routine settled, Helen felt lighter, not just in her belly but in her thinking. And that, more than any rule or number, was the proof that she was finally giving her body what it had been asking for all along. There was a time when Helen reached for something sweet, almost without thinking. A cookie after lunch. A little chocolate while watching the evening news. It wasn't about hunger. It was comfort, routine, a small reward for making it through another day. At first it felt harmless, but over time she noticed something deeper. Her heart would race after certain snacks. Her thoughts would scatter. She'd feel restless at night and foggy in the morning. What she didn't see right away was how closely it all tied back to sugar. The more often she reached for it, the more her body seemed to ask for it, especially on the days she felt tired or alone. But instead of energy, it brought a spike, then a crash. A warmth, then a kind of emotional numbness. Her joints began to ache more. Her knees, which already carried the weight of the years, stiffened in a way that made walking feel heavier. Still, it wasn't until she began shifting her habits that she saw the difference. She didn't quit sugar overnight. She added better things first. A handful of berries in her smoothie, sliced dates when she wanted something chewy and rich, a sprinkle of cinnamon in her tea to warm her from the inside out. Slowly, the cravings lost their grip. Her sleep deepened. Her energy evened out. She started waking up without the usual mental haze. One morning, while sitting with her journal and tea, she whispered aloud, "I didn't even realize how foggy I was until the fog lifted." That moment stayed with her. It reminded her that some things don't feel wrong until they're gone, and that healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a slow, quiet return to clarity. Sugar had been her habit, but not her need. What her body wanted was steadiness, and when she gave it that, through natural sweetness, gentle fiber, and emotional honesty, it thanked her in every way it could, through softer joints, calmer nights, and a mind that felt once again fully hers. Helen learned something unexpected along the way. Her gut didn't just respond to what she ate, it listened to how she lived. On the mornings she rushed, skipped breakfast, or scrolled through the news before getting out of bed, her stomach would tighten. On the days she felt anxious or overstimulated, even the healthiest meals sat heavy. It became clear that healing wasn't just physical, it was emotional, it was energetic. She began to notice how her body softened when she stepped into the light early, even for just a few quiet minutes. How her breath, when deep and slow, seemed to send a signal of safety to her insides. There was no pressure to turn life into a routine, just small things done with presence. Sometimes it was gentle stretching in the living room. Other times it was sitting on her porch, sipping warm tea and listening to birds she'd never bothered to name. Her journal sat on her lap, not because she had profound things to say, but because it felt good to empty her thoughts. One afternoon, after a long pause in the garden, she said softly, "It's like I reset my mind and my gut." That line stayed with her. It wasn't dramatic, but it was true. Her digestion was better on the days she gave herself space. Her sleep was deeper when she didn't bring her stress into bed with her. Her food worked more gently when her breath was slow. These moments became part of her gut routine as much as any smoothie or salad, and though no one would see them, they were the foundation of her healing. She stopped chasing intensity and embraced stillness, and the more she did, the more her body responded, not with quick fixes, but with quiet, lasting calm. Healing, she realized, is a conversation. And sometimes the most important thing you can do is to stop talking and start listening to your body, your breath, the morning light. They speak a language older than words. And when you honor that rhythm, something inside you finally begins to feel safe again. For a long time, Helen moved through her days like her body was something separate from her. Years of medications, weight fluctuations, restrictive diets, and the quiet toll of aging had created distance. She followed instructions, took pills, skipped meals, and told herself this was just how getting older felt. But beneath it all, something inside her had been trying to speak. She just wasn't listening. It wasn't until she began tending to her gut, gently, daily, that she realized how much she'd muted her own signals. She noticed how her stomach tightened when she pushed too hard, how her thoughts became cloudy when she ignored hunger or let herself go too long without rest. She started to see her gut for what it really was, not just a digestive organ, but a second brain, one that held wisdom, one that mirrored her mood, her rhythm, her stress. As it began to feel safe, less bloated, less inflamed, so did she. Her mind quieted, her breath slowed. And one morning, while folding laundry, she said out loud to no one in particular, "I used to ignore my body. Now I listen, and it whispers, not screams." That shift changed everything, because healing didn't arrive in one big moment. It arrived in small rituals, a warm smoothie in silence, a walk without a destination, saying no to something that drained her, choosing soup instead of skipping dinner. These choices weren't about control, they were about trust, each one a thread in a fabric that slowly began to feel whole again. Rebuilding that trust takes time, but it starts with one act of kindness toward yourself each day. Not to fix what's broken, but to remember what's still strong. The gut doesn't ask for perfection, it asks for presence. It responds to steady effort. And when you begin to show up quietly without force, it shows up for you in return. That's when everything begins to shift. Not just how you feel physically, but how safe and steady you feel living inside yourself again. You don't need to follow trends to feel better. You don't need to count every bite or fear every meal. Healing your gut after 60 is not about rules, it's about rhythm. It's about listening to your body in a way you may not have in years. Small, steady changes like adding more fiber, choosing real foods, and creating calm morning routines can reset your digestion, reduce inflammation, and bring back the energy you thought was gone for good. Let this be your reminder that your gut isn't separate from your life, it is your life. When your digestion works well, your mind is clearer, your body feels lighter, and everything starts to feel more possible. From a morning smoothie to a short walk under the sun, the smallest habits can lead to lasting health. If this message spoke to you, share your story in the comments below. What has helped your gut? What has surprised you on your healing journey? We'd love to hear from you. And if you want more simple, powerful insights to support your health after 60, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your healing starts now, quietly, gently, and one day at a time.